With only a few weeks to go until Uncharted is released, we're all hoping that it will buck the trend of disappointing video game adaptations. So we've decided to take a look at the top 10 worst video game movies ever made. Hey gang, it's Emily from It's Gone Viral and welcome back to the channel. Movies based on video games always have a tough time at the box office, so this week we'll be taking a look at some of the worst video game movies ever made, from expensive flops to the plain ridiculous. Right, let's get into it. Jake Gyllenhaal has a phenomenal track record of never really appearing in a bad movie. Except for this one, that is. Although it wasn't exactly a flop at the box office, it's fair to say that when a movie is starring Gyllenhaal, Gemma Arterton, Ben Kingsley and Alfred Molina, you could expect it to be entertaining at least. But what do you know? It isn't. It's long, boring, and considering it came out over 10 years ago, we still don't really know what they were trying to achieve with it. And it's probably fair to say that since doing this movie, Gyllenhaal hasn't really appeared in a big-budget Hollywood blockbuster since then, except for Spider-Man: Far From Home. Stick to critically acclaimed indie movies, Jake. How did they get Mario and Luigi so wrong? 1993's Super Mario Bros. Is easily one of the worst video game adaptations ever made, and judging by this poster, are you surprised? Bob Hoskins and John Leguizamo star as the Mario brothers in their attempt at bringing the famous brothers to big screen, and manage to piss off both gaming and cinema fans alike. If you haven't seen it yet, expect weird costumes, interesting accents, and some truly shocking CGI, which is nuts given the whole movie was based on a Nintendo video game. Luckily though, Nintendo is giving the Mario Brothers another chance at the box office, with a new movie coming out with an amazing cast, including Seth Rogen, Anya Taylor-Joy, Jack Black and Chris Pratt as Mario. Yay! Here's a tip to any up-and-coming directors. Don't give your movie 3 different names in one title. It's very annoying. Now, we're not saying that fans didn't like this movie because of its name. They didn't like it because, again, it's pretty rubbish. In the sequel to the 2001 movie, Lara Croft Tomb Raider, Angelina Jolie returns to the role of everyone's favourite explorer in order to find Pandora's box. Given that the first movie wasn't exactly a massive hit and only did okay at the box office, bringing Lara back for a fairly uninspiring and cash-grabbing sequel was always going to be a risk, and this risk ultimately didn't pay off. A sequel was planned to finish off the trilogy, but Jolie pulled out of the project after the Cradle of Life's mediocre box office performance. At least Alicia Vikander's Tomb Raider movie was good though. On the face of it, you'd be forgiven for thinking that Max Payne could have made for an excellent movie adaptation. Mark Wahlberg stars as Max Payne, who becomes hellbent on getting revenge after his wife and child were murdered. That sounds pretty good, right? I'd watch that. But then, I did watch that, and quickly realised that I'd rather be doing just about anything else. Max Payne was all about inflicting gruesome revenge, but giving him a PG-13 rating in order to do so just really doesn't work. There's a limit to how angry you can get when kids are watching, after all, even if your family has been murdered. Wahlberg himself picked up the dreaded Golden Raspberry nomination for his portrayal in the movie, and second one for another performance of his that year. Geez, 2008 was not a good year for Marky Mark. And the film was battered by critics upon release, with the film holding a current Rotten Tomatoes score of 15%. With a surprisingly low budget of $35 million, Max Payne only took over $85 million at the box office, which is an unbelievably low amount for such a beloved game. And despite making a profit, no sequel was made, and Max Payne has been untouched by movie studios since. The bald-headed assassin is back in this kind of a sequel, but also not, and also something not really good enough to be a standalone movie. This 2014 movie has an unbelievably bad Rotten Tomatoes score of just 8%. Ouch. Which, given the success of the Hitman video games, is truly something. Amazingly though, this movie still made money at the box office, which is even more incredible when you remember that one of the characters uses an asthma inhaler to cure his lung cancer. Ugh, what a shocking movie this is. One of the most disappointing adaptations of recent years is one that had a huge amount of potential, but ultimately just ended up being a complete mess. 2016's Assassin's Creed. Unsurprisingly, seeing as it was released in 2016, Michael Fassbender was cast in the role, who was a big name at the time. However, question marks still remain to this day whether he was the right man to take on the role, which seems to have stunted his career somewhat. Well, that and The Snowman really didn't help either. Despite taking a cool $240 million at the box office, almost doubling its $125 million budget, fans of the game were understandably left feeling very shortchanged, with the movie failing to live up to its frightening potential. Assassin's Creed currently holds a pathetic 18% approval rating on Rotten Tomatoes, and plans for a sequel were binned after Disney acquired the rights to the distributor 20th Century Fox in 2019. We still believe there's a good movie to be made out of this game, but sadly, this wasn't it. It's always fairly baffling when a movie based on a video game ends up with terrible computer-animated graphics and special effects. And that is just one of the reasons why Mortal Kombat 2 Annihilation regularly appears on these lists. Annihilation is the sequel to the surprisingly well-received first edition of the Mortal Kombat franchise, and was seen at the time almost as a guaranteed moneymaker. However, nothing in life is guaranteed, and Mortal Kombat 2 Annihilation will always be a cautionary tale of how not to take a video game to the big screen. This movie only took an embarrassing $51 million at the box office, and as a result, not only was the third installment cancelled, but it took over 2 decades for the franchise to return to the big screen. And what do you know? That flopped too. When will producers learn? It's hard to believe in 2022, but there was a time when gamers and cinema fans alike flocked to the cinema to spend their hard-earned cash on a film starring Jean-Claude Van Damme and Kylie Minogue. This was, of course, Street Fighter the movie. However, in the almost 30 years that have since passed, most people who have seen Street Fighter the movie will ask themselves a few questions. Mainly, how did this film make any money? And also, who was in charge of casting? To be honest, it's difficult to judge Street Fighter the movie too harshly. It is very much a movie of its time, and quite frankly, it's astonishing that a movie starring Jean-Claude Van Damme and Kylie Minogue took just shy of £100 million at the box office. So, whilst we certainly don't recommend watching it, we also kind of think, fair play. But seriously, don't watch it. It's 2016's WARCRAFT is something of an intriguing movie. On the one hand, it took a whopping $439 million at the box office and even became the highest grossing video game movie of all time at the time of its release. But on the other hand, it still lost a huge amount of money, and most people who saw it hated it. How did it lose money, I hear you ask? Well, because the movie had a promotional budget of around $110 million, which is an incredible amount of money to spend on marketing, especially when no one in the US or the West in general actually bothered to go and see the movie, which resulted in the movie taking less than $100 million in the US and received an incredibly low 28% approval rating on Rotten Tomatoes. Essentially, if Chinese audiences hadn't flocked to see WARCRAFT, then we'd be talking about one of the biggest flops of all time, video game adaptation or not. But instead, we're talking about a movie that kind of did flop, but also kind of didn't. A semi-flop, if you will. Yeah, that felt as weird to say as it sounded. Sorry Christian Slater fans, but Alone in the Dark was always going to feature on this list. The 2005 movie not only holds the title of one of the worst video game movies ever made, but also it's widely regarded as one of the worst movies ever made. With terrible special effects, some pretty dire acting, and a real lack of originality to anything in the movie, Alone in the Dark manages to ignore a lot of the source material and instead becomes a weird rip-off of the likes of Alien and The Evil Dead. It's almost as if the people making the movie hadn't played the game. Incredibly, despite it not even making back its low $20 million budget at the box office, a sequel was released in 2008, and guess what? That movie is somehow considered to be even worse than the original, taking only $133,000 at the box office. Alone in the Dark has a hilarious 1% Rotten Tomatoes rating and will always be known as the movie that almost killed Christian Slater's career. A real sorry affair for anyone involved, but now that time has passed, we can all see the funny side of this truly dreadful movie. So that's our list of the top 10 worst video game movies of all time. But which movies do you think should be added to the list? Let us know in the comments below. And here's hoping Uncharted doesn't feature in a similar list in the years to come. In Tom Holland, we trust. Thanks for watching It's Gone Viral, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more content like this.